I'm Matthew.
I'm Marty.
I'm Carlos.
And we are the Heroes 3. Welcome to Heroes 3, the bi-weekly podcast where three friends explore the best, worst, and everything in between in the world of Asian cinema. And this week, we're taking a look at 1993's Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, co-written and directed by Rob Cohen, starring Jason Scott Lee, Lauren Holly, Nancy Kwan, and Robert Wagner.
And we fooled
you
real good.
As I was saying, you might know this isn't the Big Boss from 1970 or 71.
We can't resist doing an April Fool's episode.
But yeah, we cannot. It was that close, and I wanted to do something a little different. And I thought this movie was going to be a lot. I mean, it's pretty goofy. I thought it was going to be a lot stupider than it was. And it's not a bad movie.
Yeah, it really holds together. I haven't seen it since I was a kid, but man, yeah. It's great.
Yeah.
And of course, obviously that's almost an episode of another Marty podcast, but the music's really good. And it was in 8 billion trailers, and you've probably heard it even if you don't realize that you've heard it.
Yep.
Yeah, this is one Marty, of the highlights of 90s score.
Sure.
Yeah, just
I'll
incredible.
let you hear based on what I got set up. I don't want you to go off just yet. So
okay, yeah, I will hold back.
Put it,
yeah,
just
okay. I'll say nothing. But
all right.
great.
No, it's cool. I don't want to spoil your excitement, but you'll have plenty of time to talk about it soon.
Oh, dude, that's so exciting. But yeah,
Yeah.
For anyone listening, if you haven't seen the movie in a long time, definitely recommend rewatching it. It wasn't quite how I remembered, like tonally even.
Tonally is a good thing to say.
Also, if you've never had a crush on Lauren Holly, just get it's just
get this movie, and then you'll
nothing you can do about it. But
yeah, that's great. Yeah,
she's got some dynamite outfits in this movie.
Yeah,
yeah,
styled her up.
real.
Yeah.
It's definitely it's funny to me because I mean, obviously we're talking about the life of Bruce Lee and Linda Lee, and it covers, the 60s, and you see like the clothing, but for some reason the hairstyles in this movie can't escape the 90s to me. Like
I was gonna say, whenever that first, like the first what's the character's name? But like one of the first like follower guys,
oh sure. Yeah.
like shows up, and he's saying that like he said he saw some Chopsaki flicks, which I have no idea what Chopsaki flicks he was watching in the early 60s,
Yeah.
but
Right.
whatever. Jerome, that's the character's name.
Yeah.
But he is the most 90s looking. Like he looks like he walked out of New Jack Swing.
Yeah,
like he doesn't look
totally.
like he's from the 60s.
The
But
set of a
but
different
whatever.
world.
Yeah, it's awesome. And also, I mean, I guess we can kind of get into this, but the movie was optioned and built on top of Linda's biography that she wrote and published pretty shortly after Bruce's death. Apparently she wrote a second book about her life with Bruce years later, but this is based on that initial book. And so it's good to keep in mind, really, this whole project is kind of through the lens of Linda. And I think if you kind of weren't picking up on that if you watched it years ago, it's really interesting. I would say overall it's pretty fairly like even handed, I would say.
Yeah.
I can think of some other projects where it's like it's marketed as the biopic of this person, but it's also kind of from this this other point of view. Like, did you guys see Love and Mercy, the Brian Wilson movie?
I haven't, no.
I have not.
I actually think it's really strong, but that also, apparently Brian Wilson's current wife is like heavily involved in it, and she really is depicted as this kind of like saintly figure. And apparently some of my friends that are like really into Brian Wilson and his history kind of say it's playing pretty fast and loose with her depiction and how it relates to him and things like that. So the Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, it's like there is an awful lot about like what Bruce's identity as a husband and as a father, which I'm sure was important to him. But I I think that probably wouldn't be the expectation going into like a Bruce biopic, that it's like really kind of focused on those elements and really a little less on kind of the highlights of his career otherwise. But having said that, I think it still treats a lot of that other material pretty well. But Linda definitely comes across as kind of like, I don't know, kind of almost sort of perfect or heroic or something.
Yeah, there's a definite. Well, okay, I think. Let me start over. I don't even know how to approach this. Okay, so my take is that it's definitely like this Hollywood biopic kind of pushing the drama up and kind of smoothing out like a lot of the plot, and kind of it actually takes like things and like rearranges stuff in the timeline, and it plays real loose with a lot of the facts. So I feel like, I mean, when I saw it when I was a kid, I wasn't like studying all this stuff. This was 1993. I was like playing with dinosaurs because Jurassic Park or something, you know, like, and
13-year-old Carlos is playing.
yeah.
Sorry.
39-year-old Carlos is playing with dinosaurs. But so I mean, again, we're at this point where, you know, of course I'm studying up, trying to tighten all my knowledge up for Bruce Lee, because we're going to be talking about this. And actually, when we right when we started doing Heroes 3, I was like, well, I know at some point this is going to come up, so I really want to start learning as much as I can about, you know, the Bruce Lee that, you know, all the hardcore Bruce Lee fans like.
And then it turns out you were reading up about a different Bruce Lee, this guy from Cleveland.
Yeah. And seeing it now with all of that knowledge, it's really easy to slip into, oh, come on, like, no, like, this is wrong, or that's wrong, or this is wrong. But an interesting thing that was kind of revealed to me as I was looking into this for our April Fool's episode, which is funny to think about having to do a lot of homework for it, but there's a director's commentary on the release, and the director is going into all the details, and as he's talking about the film, he's saying, well, this is wrong, this wasn't how this happened. And so it's like so crazy to me that he basically seems like he was armed with all the knowledge to make a more authentic biopic, but studio meddling and kind of budgeting for the film. It was a kind of a lower budget film compared to a lot of other major movies. I think it was like $16 million dollars was the budget. So
it really got bang for the buck. Like,
they really had to try and. But I mean, I'm not giving them excuses either. Like, there's a better way to put together a Bruce Lee biopic for sure.
I mean, but I think this is something that happens in a lot of biopics. It's not like accidental, like misunderstanding of the facts. A lot of times it's intentional changes for, like, you know, dramatic reasons too. And that's of course like super subjective, because, you know, someone else could say like, oh, that's actually not that dramatic to me at all. Like, the real story is more interesting. So.
But I think that you can see, like what you were saying, how this is through the vision of Linda, and it's also kind of trying to promote certain things. So like you see in the film that there's like racism is a big part of the film. And I honestly feel like, I mean, based on what I know of Bruce Lee, definitely he had struggles breaking through because of his race, but he didn't really like to stand on that as a crutch. He
right.
I mean, I think of like that famous interview where he's saying, like, you know, I'm a human. You know, like they ask him,
you still think of yourself Chinese, or do you ever think of yourself as North American?
You know what I want to think of myself? As a human being. Because, I mean, I don't want to sound like, you know, as Confucius say, but under the sky, under the heaven, man, there is but one family. It just so happened, man, that people are different.
And this was, you know, a big important thing for him. And the major thing I think that he would have wanted to push across is like his passion, martial arts. Of course, he would talk about all of the crazy stuff that's happened in his life, because honestly, if you really did make a straight up dedicated documentary about Bruce Lee, that the material in his life is enough. You wouldn't have to make up stuff.
No, you're
Like,
totally right. I mean, it's
Yeah,
interesting.
so-
I feel like it captures something about the 90s too, where and I had a similar reaction where I actually think a lot of the racial tensions are a little exaggerated, even at
Yeah.
least based on
Hmm.
what I know, which I would prefer over, say, a movie that would have been made 20 years previously that would have actually just kind of swept things under the rug and
Mhm.
not addressed it at
Yeah.
all. So, and I think this approach probably holds up a little bit better, but yeah, I think at times it does almost reduce Bruce Lee to kind of like he's the person who is fighting against prejudice, and not that that isn't a significant portion of his life, but I think if you were to ask 100 people like why is Bruce Lee a legend, I think this movie gets into some of the like kind of some of those pillars, but yeah, it's interesting. I think it's not what you would expect.
I have been seeing the clip of them going to see Breakfast at Tiffany. Lately, some people have been using that as kind of an example because, and I haven't seen Licorice Pizza, but there's been some criticism about how certain Asian
right.
characters are handled in that movie, and people have been using that clip from this film kind of to prove the point. And it's kind of wild to think about that now we're 1993 to 2022 and people are still kind of fighting over these same representations. But the other thing that we can say is that without them doing stuff like this in this film in 93, which is like, again, little Carlos not even really thinking about things, I just wanted to see Bruce Lee doing jump kicks and stuff.
Yeah.
I'd never stop to consider that. So, and I'd see that in the movie, I'd be like, oh man, that's kind of a big
That's
deal.
messed up. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
No, that's a good point.
yeah. And the other thing I wanted to say real quick before we get into what I have set up is that it's a biopic for sure, but you can see that in certain instances they wanted it to also be an action movie. And
Yeah.
That's the big thing I was going to say is
Yeah.
that this movie feels like it's a 60-minute Bruce Lee biopic spliced in with a 30-minute or 60, however the math works out,
yeah.
action movie, like a Western take, but very much in that style of Hong Kong.
Yeah,
action
kind of like a
movies and
what
his
if
movies.
Bruce Lee was in this situation or that situation. And
I think it'd go a little something like this.
Yeah, sure.
It's funny. I wonder if did you guys read it this way? I almost got a little bit of like a fantasy feeling in most of these action
Yeah.
pieces. I don't know. Maybe I'm just bringing
Oh,
my
yeah.
Totally.
own
I mean,
knowledge
the
into it, and I kind of liked it actually.
So, and that's what I was also going to say is that if there was, maybe if they would have been able to market the film this way, where it was like kind of your one foot in each, side of it, where it's like, this is a biopic, but it's also another kung fu movie that's, if they were able to push forward that this is what the movie was.
Oh, like it's in his mind. Like he goes to that
Mm.
the dance hall in Hong Kong, and maybe it's a really simple confrontation, but in his head he can already like see an action movie or something.
Mm-hmm. I just think it's kind of a missed opportunity because there's been nothing like that ever.
Right.
And watching it, knowing, that
Well,
they could have.
I can think of a movie that's kind of like that, and it's not very good.
Oh, really?
Is it
Uh,
Sidekicks with?
It's Sucker Punch.
Oh, Sucker Punch.
Oh, geez, Sucker Punch.
Sucker Punch is all about having fantasy sequences that
yeah,
are
man, Sucker Punch is a
cool,
strange one.
quote unquote cool action sequences. I don't like Sucker Punch very much.
Yeah, it's another. I mean,
That is not here or there though.
well, I mean, now
this
that
movie is good.
you mentioned that though, I think of some of the revisionist stuff that Tarantino did in like Inglourious
Mhm.
Bastards or
Sure,
Once Upon a
sure.
Time in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Something like that. Like if this kind of was tightened up and retooled to kind of be pushed forward as something similar to that, I think and the movie was successful too. I think
Right.
when it falls short is, people that really wanted to see the Bruce Lee that they knew represented on film. And I mean, you could argue it's the Bruce Lee that Linda knew. So this is the image that she wanted to put forth. And I don't know how she feels about the film after it came out, but it sounded like she was pretty involved with the movie beforehand, and here we are.
Yeah,
But
I think that's a good. Yeah, I think that's a good way of framing it, and also, yeah, I think they balance those objectives pretty well. It's like you look at the poster, dragon in a big font, and it's Bruce doing this amazing kind of jump kick against the rising sun or whatever. So it's like you have to pay that off. This has got to be an action movie, like with dude energy or whatever.
Yeah.
And so like that is here in the movie, but really kind of the like thematic thrust is more about kind of their relationship and Bruce as a person and his own like personal struggles. So it's yeah,
It
I don't
doesn't
know. I
give
think
you,
it was not necessarily an easy job when you think about it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think now actually it's pretty interesting too, and we'll get into this a bit more when we're covering these films, but the discourse on the history of Bruce Lee continues. Like even just this past year, there's been these revelations about Bruce Lee and Linda and like all this stuff that's been coming out, and it kind of coats like the history of it all. And I think I've mentioned it before, but Matthew Pauly's book, Bruce Lee: A Life, I really enjoyed that book, and even in there, he does a lot to portray Bruce Lee as a person, maybe not like as like a like a god, like almost like what you would see in this film, where he's very they put him up as on a pedestal. You don't see all the little grimy little dirty secrets that that have come out.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
The worst thing this movie says is like, oh, he got wrapped up in his work and didn't spend as much time with his family as he probably should have.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I'm sure other stuff happened. Like he was just a guy. Like he was a guy that was really good at martial arts. He wasn't, he's not Second Coming or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, so this also is an April Fool's episode. So I didn't want us to just kind of pick the movie apart, because I'm sure there are other people that have done that. But we are going to pick it apart a little bit, but hopefully educate you as well. So I put together a little true or false quiz about the film and about Bruce Lee. So,
love it, dude.
Yeah, so this will kind of guide us through. And I kind of picked it so it kind of help us talk about different aspects of the movie. So, here we are, April Fools. Are you guys ready?
Dude, I think so.
I guess so. Gonna embarrass ourselves.
Yeah, it's fine. Don't worry, because we're all gonna learn more. By the end of this arc, we're gonna know everything about Bruce Lee.
Everything.
Yep.
Secrets will be revealed.
Nice.
Okay, so number 1. There are many famous quotes by Bruce Lee. One among them being, "The key to immortality is first living a life worth remembering."
This is true or
did
false?
he really say that?
True or false?
Ooh.
It's not that hard. It's 50-50.
That's true.
I think false, because don't they attribute that to Brandon in the credits? Or maybe I'm remembering it wrong.
You can, I mean...
I think
yeah.
it's false. I think it's his son's quote.
Okay. Matthew?
Good. I'll go with Marty. I'll say false.
False. So this is not a Bruce Lee quote. And I don't know...
Again, it seems on the nose for a person who did not know he was going to die incredibly young to be talking about immortality.
Yeah, good point. So there's a bit, and so in the collector's edition of the DVD that I shared with you guys, there's like a little preamble by Linda, and she actually attributes it in that preamble to St. Augustine.
St. Augustine once said, "The key to immortality is first living a life worth remembering."
But honestly, I tried digging that up, and I couldn't find that either. So I did find there was a blog that it's called like Sourcing Bruce Lee, And even they on the blog couldn't find the true source for this quote, and they actually suggested that it might have been written for the film. And Marty, that screenshot at the end of the dedication to Brandon, it's listed under that dedication. It's not quoted to Brandon.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's kind of sneaky. Gotcha.
Yep. The other thing that I found out is that at Bruce and Brandon's gravesite, there's a memorial bench, and on the back of that bench, it has that quote, and it's not attributed to anybody either. So, yeah, I don't know who wrote it, but it wasn't Bruce Lee. But you will encounter this a lot, where people like to share stuff on the internet these days, and context is a thing of the past, right?
Right.
So that's something that I just wanted to bring up because I thought it was really interesting. So yeah, number 1 was false. That is not a quote by Bruce Lee. Okay, number 2. Bruce Lee was born in San Francisco.
That is true.
Yeah, I think true also.
That is true. Correct. So
Yeah,
Bruce
he was
Lee.
born, because I remember, because we have probably on the podcast 6 times, so sorry if I have. But me and my wife took a trip to San Francisco last year, and we went to Chinatown, and I actually saw a big cheesy statue of Bruce Lee.
Oh, dude, sweet.
Awesome.
And I got a wall scroll that I'm sure is very not official of Bruce Lee.
Oh,
but if you're in
man.
Chinatown, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
That's great. I love it. So on November 27, 1940, Lee Jun-fan was born in San Francisco while his father, Lee Hoi-chun, traveled abroad with his Cantonese opera troupe. Lee Hoi-chun was a very well-known performer and film actor, and his family did benefit from that. So Bruce Lee was, I guess people don't really talk about it much, but because of his father and their family, they were pretty well-to-do. So, when he was a kid, they had like a driver. I think he even had like a pet monkey when he was a kid. And Bruce Lee's mother, Grace Ho, was of mixed Chinese and European descent. Something that I also feel like should have come up in this film, where they're bringing up race a lot.
Yeah.
Bruce Lee was, of mixed descent, and they don't even show his mom in the film. The weird thing to me is that whenever they portray his family, it's like just him and his father all by themselves, and they barely like talk about anybody else in his family, and it's like they play up that weird like demon's curse, because it's built out of something that actually happened. So Lee Hoi-chun and Grace, they had a son earlier that passed away, and according to like Chinese superstitions, if you're gonna have another son, you need to kind of disguise them so this demon doesn't take them away. So when Bruce Lee was a baby, they dressed him up like a girl, and they actually gave him an earring, just kind of superstition to protect him.
Okay, I figured that seemed too specific. 'Cause
Yeah.
They mentioned that in the film. That seemed too specific to not be.
Yeah, they really
true
play
thing.
that out. And but so yeah, actually Lee's born Chinese name is Lee Jun-fan, and that also can be interpreted to mean shake up San Francisco. Just that's something I think
Dude,
is
cool.
really fun too. Yeah. All right, number 3. You ready for this one, Marty? Randy Edelman composed the theme to MacGyver.
I hope that's
I think
true.
that's true.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah, I was looking that up, and I mean, obviously we've already mentioned his scoring, and you can go off, Marty. But the one thing that I thought was so crazy is just the amount of work this dude has done. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy because he kind of came up in the pop world in like the 60s and 70s, like producing tracks and stuff. I think he produced stuff for like the Carpenters or something, I want to say.
Yeah, and I think like Barry Manilow.
Yeah.
But one of the other things that I thought was really funny is when I was digging this up is he did the music for the Bruce Campbell show Briscoe County Jr. And the theme for Briscoe County Jr. is still used for the NBC Olympics. So like whenever they're showing like what's coming up next, they'll literally just be playing the theme song from Briscoe County Jr. and I had no idea that was a thing, and it cracks me up.
Yeah, dude, it's so awesome. I mean, he definitely there are a few projects like that where he overshoots the target and it's like, sorry, this is too masterful.
That's definitely what we got going on here. Yeah. The music for this film, I mean, it really is like way above. It brings the movie up a lot higher to me.
Yeah, and you mentioned it earlier, Matthew, but it's on the soundtrack. It's titled Bruce and Linda, which is it's actually basically from two scenes in the movie, and then they kind of just remove the silence in between them. It's like it's when the dinner with Linda's mom kind of goes wrong, and then she runs out after him. I think that's when we first hear that kind of piano come in. So it's sort of built of like two main themes. There's this more kind of ballad theme, and then that leads into this more driven, like heroic action thing that I tear up every time.
It's
so great. It's like,
yeah,
it's not
I can totally just picture it like at the Academy Awards. This would be like a theme that they would play.
Oh, but I meant to say, so this track has this second life in tons of places. It was all over trailers in the 90s and commercials, and it's waned a little bit these days, but you'll still kind of hear it occasionally. It's amazing.
And honestly, it's a type of scoring that I really do miss in like film. Like, I wish this of style would come back, because it just makes you feel so much, even if there's nothing happening. It's perfect.
Or it's kind of like, I would put it in like the pantheon of other like great 90s action score. Like, say, like Jerry Goldsmith's score to Rudy has some just like beautiful, heroic, moving kind of stuff. And it's both that score and Randy Edelman's score here, they're in this cool zone where it's like they're not like overly sophisticated kind of like erudite classical things, and they're also not kind of like the orchestra as a rock band. It's like this is very accessible. I don't know, it's this cool spot that is exceedingly rare these days.
Yeah. I also was looking up other films that he's composed for. Among them are Kindergarten Cop.
Yeah, dude.
the Chipmunks Adventure, like the animated like Chipmunks film. Ghostbusters 2 he was in with.
Yeah.
And
actually
also
the Shanghai Noons.
Yeah, Shanghai Noon.
That has a really
Shanghai
good
Noon.
like Wild West theme. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really
I
impressive.
haven't watched Shanghai Noon since I was probably in middle school.
Oh man,
I think it holds
it's
up
been
really
rough.
well. It's great.
Oh, cool. I imagine it'll come up on the podcast at some point. So,
Yep. Okay, so the next one we got here is kind of a meaty one, but the controversial fight between Bruce Lee and Wong Jack-man was ignited by Lee training non-Chinese in Kung Fu. Let me. That sounded weird. Let me do it again.
you're good.
The controversial fight between Bruce Lee and Wong Jack-man was ignited by Lee training non-Chinese in Kung Fu, and left Bruce Lee in traction with a back injury that resulted in him focusing on his writings. True or false?
It's definitely what happens in the film.
Yeah. I feel like I remember reading that it was like there was something like that happened, but not quite that dramatic. So I'm going to say false.
Yeah, I think I'm going to say false too, because you laid it out really specifically. So I'm guessing if any of those like details are false, then the whole thing's false, right?
Yeah, that's the way to take a test, man. I love that. So it is false, yeah. So there's quite a bit of history behind this, and it's a very controversial subject for fans. And so I did a little bit of a write-up, and I'm going to read through this, and we can talk about the film too, because the film covers these moments, but it really mixes everything up. And it's so weird to me too, because there's a scene where Bruce is meeting with like these Chinese masters, and it looks like they're just in a bar, but they mention in the film that they mentioned Wong Jack Man's name in the film, but the character of Johnny Sun, the antagonist that he fights against in the film, is a totally made up character, but he basically represents what Wong Jack Man was. So the thing about it is, in the film, Bruce is trying to make a name for himself. He's trying to open up a school, and these old masters, their issue is that he's going to be training non-Chinese kung fu, and that was an issue that did come up when he was trying to do his thing, but that was not the reason why any of this stuff happened. And so I'm going to go into it. Sorry, so in 1964, Bruce was trying to make a name for himself after opening his second Junfang Kung Fu Institute with his friend and a fellow martial artist, James Yim Lee. Through James, he had a chance to demonstrate at Ed Parker's Long Beach International Karate Championships. This is the event that there's the footage of him doing the 1-inch punch.
Yeah.
That you've probably seen.
Oh,
Like
cool.
It's like black and white, right?
Yes, yeah. And so at this event, he basically gave a demonstration, and he did the 1-inch punch, and he did a couple of kind of like tests, hey, if I can touch you before you defend yourself, like, I bet you can't defend yourself in time. And the other thing that he did, though, is he took time to basically take down traditional martial arts. So he would do this thing where he'd do a demonstration, and then he would then tell you what was wrong. So it was a little bit of a controversial thing then, but it wasn't until another event in August where he gave another demo at the Sun Sing Theater in San Francisco's Chinatown. So here he really riled everyone up by showcasing how he thought Wing Chun, his style, was so much better than other traditional martial arts. And there's a phrase that Matthew Pauly uses in that Bruce Lee: A Life that I really think is great. He says that Bruce Lee said that the old masters basically were old tigers that had no teeth. So, oh, snap.
Wow.
Yeah. So this was like a big kind of like controversy in Chinatown. And the thing that he said before he left was, "I would like to let everyone know that anytime my Chinatown brothers want to research my Wing Chun, they're welcome to find me at my school in Oakland." So people were like, did he just challenge everyone? So like this turned into a thing. And there's a young martial artist named David Chin who really was riled up by this, and he basically helped set up this challenge match between Bruce Lee and a martial arts practitioner named Wong Jack Man. So Wong Jack Man was like a traditionalist, so he's like around the same age as Bruce Lee, but he was really representing the opposite of what Bruce Lee was representing. So they had this match, and this was at Bruce Lee's Kun. There was Linda, David Chin. There was only a handful of people there, and there's all these conflicting information. But
there wasn't six Chinese martial arts masters sitting in robes on little chairs.
No, right? So yeah,
is that in Mortal Kombat?
In the film, it's straight up like Mortal Kombat. Yeah, there's like this like secret lair, and Johnny Sun comes out, and they have this match. So yeah, in the movie, what happens is they have this knockout, drag out fight. And right at the end, Bruce wins, but he turns away, and then he gets kicked in the back. And that creates this back injury that really puts him in traction. And at the time, him and Linda have some arguments, and, they just play up that drama. none of this stuff is related to the actual facts of the history of it all. So the fight with Wong Jack-man and Bruce Lee is pretty crazy though. So a couple of the accounts, one is Linda's, and actually another one in Matthew Pauly's book, David Shin, the guy from Wong Jack-man's side, they talk about it. And basically it sounds like Bruce pretty much ended the match in 3 minutes, but it was really sloppy. Where at one point Wong Jack-man actually like turned to run away, and then Bruce like chased him, which sounds like really like some Looney Tunes stuff. But at the end of the match, Bruce basically was like, "All right, this is over. Like, don't bring it up. I don't want this to become a big deal." But eventually, people started yammering about things, and it turned into this drama. But so it's so weird to me that they kind of do it, but they don't do it. And actually what I found out too is that Wong Jack-man, when he saw the film, he sued Linda and he sued Universal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. So the other thing...
No, it's easy to forget because like this movie came out about 20 years after Bruce died. So like all of this stuff that happens in the movie, or the fictionalized accounts of the stuff that happened in the movie, was only like 25 years before the movie came out.
So there's a lot of people still around,
right? There's some, like we've said, like Bruce is this legendary figure, and some of what goes with a legend are these like tall tales that no one can really get to the bottom of, and they kind of endure to this day. But yeah, it's crazy juxtaposing like what feels like classic myth making with like the 20th century and photographs and film and stuff.
The other thing is too, when you're even going further back into martial arts, and we've talked about the lineage of Wing Chun when we talked about Ip Man and and Prodigal Son and these kind of things, and this was like an oral tradition, and different people study different ways, and different people like tell different stories. So a lot of the thing, martial arts are basically like religion to the people that are practicing this. It's a very important thing, right? And they're very dedicated, and they have pride, and this always these things come up where it's like, I'm of this lineage, or that's not the real good style, because it's also martial arts where it's like, there's a physical prowess to it, and eventually when you're practicing a fighting art, fighting is part of it. And I just think it's a really interesting thing to me, but it's so funny how all the politics of like the lineage of martial arts is such a hotly contested thing. But the other things that I wanted to mention is that Bruce Lee's back injury in real life was simply caused by a weightlifting exercise. They're called good mornings, and he was just doing his routines. What I heard is that he didn't warm up like he should have the day of, and he injured his back pretty severely, and he did have to recover from that. And in that time, he did take time to write. He did write a lot, but this wasn't a situation like in the film where he
was completely immobile.
Yeah. He didn't write like the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. That actually was published after his death using materials that he wrote. But in the film they kind of play it like him and Linda like wrote this while he was in recovery, and he that's not true. So they just take these facts and they rearrange them around to kind of suit the narrative that they're pushing in the film, which is kind of weird to me. But also we said that it's like a biopic, but it's also kind of like an action movie. So there's a way that they could have delivered this in a more believable way where you can kind of squash the people that would be critical of it. And I think that it's more of a modern thing that people, look back on the film and see all the things that are wrong with it. Let's see. Where can we go after this? All right, I got one more for you guys.
Nice.
Okay.
Bruce Lee came up with the idea for the TV show Kung Fu.
I think that is true. I feel like, or at least I heard, that's the story I had heard circulated or not.
So I think technically this is neither true nor false. I think this is still, I was reading about this. I think this is still this is in some amount of contention.
Oh, I like that. Okay. Well, I had to pick one. and I picked false. So the treatment for Kung Fu was actually written by a duo of comedy writers, Ed Spielman and Howard Friedlander. And originally it was going to be a feature called The Way of the Tiger, The Sign of the Dragon.
And that was like years before what they show in Dragon, right? Yeah.
Right. So producer Fred Weintraub, who would go on to work with Bruce Lee, he took this to Warner Brothers and was eyeing Bruce as the lead role of Kwai Chang Caine. Back then, Warner Brothers passed on it, and the reasoning that they said was that audience wouldn't buy a Chinese hero. So then it kind of got stuck in like development hell. Mm-hmm. But then it was picked up again at ABC, and it was going to be a TV movie. So once again, Bruce Lee went for the role, and he was passed up. But this time, they said it was because of his heavy accent, and eventually they settled on David Carradine. But so the thing that maybe you're thinking of, Marty, is Bruce was also working on his own show. And it was basically similar, like
The Warrior or something.
Yeah,
like
The
that?
Warrior is what it ended up. It was called Awesome, and it turned into a film called a treatment called The Warrior, and it was basically a wandering kung fu master that helps those in need in the Wild West. So Bruce Lee, one of the things he'd say is he wanted to have a show where somebody could do like kung fu, but you didn't have to like have it in a modern day where you have to explain, because he was like, you can't just fight with people, you know, in the modern day. If you set this in the West, then you have like the ability to duke it out, and it would be more entertaining. So that never was developed until very recently. So 2019 on Cinemax, I believe, Warrior it's called.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, that's an adaptation of Bruce Lee's The Warrior, and there's 2 seasons of it, and I believe a 3rd season is going to be coming out on HBO Max. So 50 years later.
Kung Fu was rebooted a few years ago too, right?
Yeah, there was I think last year there was a new Kung Fu on like the CW or something. I feel like people didn't like it. But as a kid, I also remember Kung Fu The Legend Continues, I think?
Yeah.
And Brandon Lee was in that. And yeah, so in the film, they basically play with stuff again, because one of the things that that Linda said in the book that she wrote, she kind of blurred those lines too, so people interpreted it as Bruce having the idea for Kung Fu, but it was basically taken away from him. I just think it's so crazy to me how this film, a lot of facts that people pull from Bruce Lee come from this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that.
It's so crazy to me.
I mean, it's a fun biopic all about Bruce Lee. It's like, well, yeah, why would they? You know, he lives an interesting life. Why would they lie about it?
Yeah.
Well, it's sort of like, you know, by the late 90s, someone would say like, you know, I really like dinosaurs. You know, they might have more to do with birds than they do with reptiles.
Get out of here.
Their vision's based on movement. It's like,
Well,
yeah, I mean,
it's
you
funny
pull
that you
from
say
the
that
movies you watch, you know?
Yeah.
Well, it's funny you say that, because they do say that in Jurassic Park. Like, they say at the very beginning, he's saying that it's like a giant chicken, and then the guy's it's like a giant chicken. He's like, yeah, this chicken has these claws, and then two of them come around.
It's like it's people just pull all their knowledge from like the movie that they watch all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think it's definitely an entertaining film. I had a good time revisiting it, but it also just made me laugh. Like at the beginning, you know, they basically set it up so Bruce needs to leave Hong Kong because he got in a fight with these sailors.
Got one little fight, and his mom got scared.
Dude, that's great.
Yeah, nice.
Oh, that'd be a cool trailer
amazing.
to chop up.
The reality.
I literally wrote that in my notes.
Oh,
yeah,
that's
one
so
little fight.
good.
His dad got scared.
Yeah,
Dude, I love it.
So Bruce, as a kid, liked to fight. He was picking fights, and one of the reasons that he picked Wing Chun was for street fighting. And it built to a head, and they were like, look, I mean, you punched the wrong person, so now you're gonna have to leave. But it had nothing to do with foreigners. Bruce Lee he just liked to fight with people.
Yeah.
I mean, the running theme of the demon through the film is really wild too, and they basically tie that to his death, and they gloss
Yeah.
over his death in like the last 30 seconds of the movie. Like,
Yeah, it's like
oh,
a text that's
yeah.
like, oh yeah, he just died. Which, I mean, that's kind of what happened in real life. Like it was
Right.
very sudden, and
Yeah.
it took a while for people to even know what even happened to him.
Yeah, and
Also, all the thing that makes the whole like recurring thing of the demon like standing around and like being in his visions, that makes it all the more like kind of almost disturbing, is that there's a scene where the demon is then going after his son Brandon, and he has to go and stop it.
Mhm.
And then Brandon Lee actually died like a couple of weeks before this movie came out.
Yeah, it's messed
and
up.
the movie's dedicated to him. It's so everything relating to Brandon Lee's death is so bizarre.
So weird. But yeah, I mean, any kid growing up in the 90s, it was like all that was talked about on the playground was like, there's a Bruce Lee curse. There's a Bruce Lee curse.
Yeah.
So it's like, this is, I
Which, like, whenever
suppose,
you see
a
that,
way
you can
of
kind of
depicting
feel like
that. Yeah.
you can be like, yeah, no, I can see how there's a curse.
oh
Like
man, that sucks.
it really does.
Yeah.
But actually, more fun fact about Bruce Lee's kids. Do you know that Shannon Lee has a cameo in the movie?
Oh
Bruce
yeah,
Lee's
she's
daughter.
a singer in a scene,
Yeah,
right?
she's whenever they're in like
Oh,
'cause
like the
whenever
mamas
Bruce
and
is
papas? Or,
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
cool.
yeah. That whenever they're singing some 60s song. I can't
California
remember.
Dreamin'. Yeah.
There's a
California
couple.
Dreamin', that's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, she plays the lead singer in it.
So
Dude,
yeah,
that's
So,
awesome.
cute.
in the segment with the Green Hornet, the director of the Green Hornet episode on the movie is Van Williams, who
Yeah,
plays
is the
Hornet.
Green Hornet. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was cute too.
There was another one too that I noticed. Oh, so one of the trainer for Jason Scott Lee in the film was Jerry Poteet, and he was a student of Bruce Lee that I believe he met him through Ed Parker. But he's in that Long Beach. So in the movie, they set up the Long Beach International, like Karate International, as like this boxing ring situation, and then that Johnny Sun shows up again and they fight, and that never happened. But if you look in the audience, you can see Jerry in the audience when Bruce Lee is exiting the ring,
Oh,
and he's
cool.
following right behind him. Yeah, so that's
cool.
pretty cool. And actually, I believe Michael Worth, who there's another podcast that's all about Bruceploitation films called The Clones Cast. There's a podcast called The
that's fun.
Clones Cast, and I really enjoy that podcast, and he's one of the co-hosts of that, but he works in film, and he was a student of Jerry Poteet, and I looked for him, I didn't see him in the movie, but I know that he had some involvement with it, so that's kind of cool. And yeah, I mean, I don't know, it's not the best movie. I definitely like nowadays. Well, okay, so let me tell you this. There's that Birth of the Dragon film that came out like maybe 4 or 5, maybe a little longer than that, 6 years ago, and that movie is totally about Bruce's fight with Wong Jack-man, but actually is like from Wong Jack-man's side, like it places him as like the hero of it. It's super
That's gonna
weird.
sell.
Oh, it's super weird, and like I watched like clips of it, and I was like, yeah, this is, I don't know. I should probably watch it just to watch the whole thing, but it looked really bad. But I mean, following Bruce Lee's death, all these Bruceploitation films like really playing around with these details, and I think there's still room for a really good Bruce Lee like biopic that can really like give everybody all the details. But like I said, there's still stuff coming out, so who knows what that end product would look like.
Yeah.
And
I mean, one thing
that,
I will say is like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I think that people are so passionate about it that they really, I mean, there's going to be people that are upset based on certain details that are portrayed because, you know, people think, you know, Bruce Lee has changed people's lives and he continues to change people's lives. And you don't want to see the, you know, the reason for your positive change in life being like shown as a human being with flaws. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the way I would maybe sum up my feelings around Dragon is like Yeah, I think I'm with you as far as like the accuracy and the facts of Bruce's life and what his legend deserves. And I think I agree with all that. I do think the movie really works as a movie. And so, it's not really a cheap cash in. And I frankly wasn't expecting it to hold up all that well these many years later. But I don't know. In some ways, maybe it plays better to an audience that's a little less invested in.
Yeah,
in
I
Bruce.
therally see that. Yeah, and I think that
because I think there's just like the character like threads are, I think, really strong, and it's a pretty well balanced movie, and awesome score. And I like the action sequences. Like, okay, they're not up to the level of so much of what we get to kind of look at like for the podcast, but they're not bad sequences. Like,
since you mentioned that too, John Chung, the guy that plays Johnny Sun, he's come up in Hong Kong films. He's like a grunt in so many of the films that we've covered with Jackie and stuff. He's worked alongside Jackie Chan and his stunt team, and I recognized his face when I saw the film, and I guess that he handled the fight choreography. And I mean, regarding performance too, talking about the acting, I think that Jason Scott Lee did a really good job, and Lauren Holly,
I think he did great.
I mean, they were playing to that level, that the tone of the film, this very dramatic biopic thing. Yeah. So I think that they were equally successful, and I think it's kind of cool to show Linda's side of things too in certain moments, but they kind of give her like some meatier stuff than maybe she actually did in like what we know about their lives together. But I think it's really cool, and it was entertaining. So yeah, I was cool with it. It was a fun time. I just feel like people that love Bruce Lee are very passionate.
Yep, totally.
Yeah. Good stuff though.
Yeah.
The realist April Fool's episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, probably, yeah. So a couple of random notes. I always write notes while I'm watching these movies. Whenever he has the fight with like the cooks and like early on in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And Green Onions plays the
right.
Sandlot music.
Yeah.
That's all. That's the whole note. I just thought that was funny.
That's great.
Yeah,
yep.
That was awesome.
Apparently
it was cool. You got to have a little bit of like a jukebox, like period setting.
Yeah.
In the 60s, and I thought that was mostly pretty effective.
Apparently they shot that in Hong Kong, and actually that was a set that they built, and in the middle of filming that there was a hurricane or typhoon, and the Hong Kong crew actually like built a tent over the set so they could continue filming.
Dude,
that's
awesome.
the most Hong Kong movie making thing I've ever heard.
It's insane. I love it.
Dude,
awesome. Yep.
Oh yeah, this movie is rated PG-13. It's very horny. It's a very horny movie. Yeah. It is very much talking about like how incredibly attractive Bruce Lee was, and that he was very much a ladies' man, and that him and Linda in the movie have a lot of like kind of banter and stuff, and she's real horned up for him too. So
and I mean the camera
which is
likes
cool,
her
'cause
too in the movie.
That's a cool thing that some of the research I did that pointed out is that even if Chinese people aren't or Asian people in general in non-Asian movies aren't usually, it's not quite as obviously as bad as it used to be whenever they're depicted as very like, mild or like goofy or whatever people. They're usually not sexualized. They're usually not, they're not seen as sexual beings at all. And that this really is one of only a few examples of an Asian person in a Western movie that's portrayed as a sexual being at all.
Yeah.
But which I just thought that was interesting. And the final note that I that I highlighted was that all this movie is made better with the knowledge that Linda Lee watched this and basically recorded herself at the beginning of the special edition saying, yeah, that's about right. Bruce would have liked this.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
That's funny. You have to wonder about that too. If Bruce Lee was around to see it, would this be what he wanted to see? I mean, I don't know.
I guess it's just the way that we would view Bruce Lee would be so different if he hadn't died so early on. Because, like, even if he'd only lived another decade, he would have made, like, 50 more movies or something.
Sure.
And
you know how that goes. I mean, anybody in Hollywood, like, you're going to make some clunkers, right? And it's going to...
Yeah, I know. And that's... I had a conversation with a coworker about how people dying young always makes people kind of elevate them to this legendary status. But, like, what I said was that if Jimi Hendrix could easily still be alive today. He was super young whenever he died.
Or Kurt Cobain.
It's totally possible. Or Kurt Cobain. It would be totally possible that everyone would be like that they'd be like, canceled or whatever in today's world.
Sure.
Like they probably did some really shifty things in in the 60s at some point. But whenever you die
playing
so
the
young,
guitar
then,
with your teeth,
people...
it's super unhygienic.
Yeah. Can't do that.
It ain't right. No, I think that's super interesting. Also, it's like, and it's kind of wild how little focus there is on Bruce's film career. I mean, one thing I'll say, I think that kind of works against Dragon is it really requires that you go into it knowing his status and his like legendary impact, because it doesn't really depict it. It's like, if I knew nothing else just from the film, I would think like, oh, he made a couple of movies that maybe some Hong Kong people liked, and he must be famous for having a martial arts school in America. It's like,
it puts a bigger emphasis kind of on that.
Yeah, and but I do think that they kind of they sort of frame the impact of, or the significance of Enter the Dragon pretty well, and it being this kind of like East-West co-production. But I think you guys are right. Like, had things gone on, it would have been a bunch of Hollywood films. And I wonder, like, would the Golden Harvest movies be super well remembered? Would they be considered these legendary things? Like,
I mean,
because who knows? Maybe he would have made a movie in 1977 that was like so much better than Enter the Dragon. Then Enter the Dragon was like a footnote.
Because I mean, I don't know if it's super helpful doing a lot of comparison, but it's like, okay, let's take Jackie Chan. It's like,
like what if Jackie Chan died after Drunken Master or something,
Right. Or it's like, or we can see it now, like he's maybe this counterexample. It's like he's still going on and he's still living. Like, we might go back and appreciate, Snake and Eagle Shadow, Drunken Master, The Young Master, Fearless Hyena, something like that. But do those movies have, apart from maybe Drunken Master, do they have any kind of like legendary cinema status? Not really.
And definitely nowhere near as much as like Rumble in the Bronx or Super Cop or whatever.
Right. So,
and all of that was also, the answer to Bruce Lee not being around and the industry having to find an answer to that. If Bruce Lee was still around, that would change everything.
Yeah, Jackie Chan might have not gotten as big and all that stuff. Like, there's so many like things that get spread off, like so many ripples from that.
Just keep talking about alternate realities.
We could.
Yeah, totally. Oh, sorry. Last little weird critique. It's like, why can't they just talk about Raymond Chow? They like make up this Hong Kong producer.
Well, and they do that with, I mean, like I said, the thing that's weird to me is they mention Wong Jack-man, but the character that represents him is somebody else. Jesse Glover, who had kind of a falling out with Bruce Lee, that character, what'd you say his name? Jerome in the film? That's basically Jesse Glover's character in the movie. And
gotcha.
What's it? Robert Wagner's character? I forget his name in the film, but he's like
Bill Krieger.
Yeah, they make this character up, but he represents like a couple of different of these producers that Bruce Lee would deal with. And it's just kind of, they were like, well, we got to just smush this together so we can make a movie.
Right.
And it's like, damn, you you didn't really need to, but I guess, but now it's not really true what you're doing. Now it's something else. So why are you doing it to begin with? But also, I said, studio meddling and budgeting, are big, huge factors in making films, especially in Hollywood. So I think that's a big part of why we ended up with what we got.
Well, it also joins a great tradition of like Hong Kong loose biographies. Like,
oh man,
they have tons of fun with the facts, right?
Ip Man, like the Ip Man films we talked about, they just change stuff up. Like his kids, like the timing of everything, it's just so super loose with all of that. And I mean, actually, Ip Man films are a good example. It's like, it's just an action movie. It's not.
Yeah, the part where he's like, I think our government should have the right to steal intellectual property from technology companies. It was so weird. It's like,
that's IP, man.
Right.
Yeah, IP Man.
Yeah. Well, and I do think it's with Ip Man, again, like we said with the timing thing. Ip Man is obviously very, fast and loose with stuff, but also it takes place in like, the 30s and was made in 2008. And this was made 20 years after the things that happen in the movie.
Right. Yeah.
So, and like with lots of people who are still alive and whatnot.
Yeah, but the Ip Man, in Ip Man 4, there's like stuff that they just made up.
Oh, well, yes. I guess I'm thinking mainly of the first one that is the most quote unquote grounded of the movies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the 4 one is like, that's like Rocky 4 at that point.
Yeah, it is. It is. That's great.
Anyways, yeah, no, that's Dragons. It is a fun movie. Don't go into it thinking that you can, write your report on Bruce Lee.
Yeah, totally.
in your 9th grade English class after watching Dragon the Bruce Lee story. But it is a fun movie, and Jason Scott Lee's really good as Bruce Lee. Marty mentioned before we started rolling, his neck's very thick compared to Bruce Lee. But
yeah,
he doesn't not look like him. Like yeah. Like, he doesn't not look like Bruce. Like, he looks a little like Bruce Lee, and they like do his hair to look more like him and stuff.
Yeah, totally. And he's also he's not playing him like a caricature. He's like he's mimicking the accent and the mannerisms and everything. But this feels like, it's a very 3-dimensional performance, I think.
But yeah, Dragon the Bruce Lee story. It's pretty good.
Yeah, totally.
I was thinking about his performance as you were mentioning, and there's that line that he goes, "I'm Bruce Lee."
Yeah, that's a really good one.
Oh man, that's so funny.
He has a lot of good deliveries of lines.
But I think this is a great way to lead into the films that we're going to be talking about, and we're still planning on doing The Big Boss, so that'll be coming in I think we're just going to basically push our regularly scheduled.
Yeah, this will just be a slightly later normally scheduled episode. So.
Sounds good to me.
Sweet.
Well, thank you so much for checking us out. If you like the show, you can listen to a review on whatever you're listening to this on. Apple Podcasts is the big one that helps us out, though. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We're at Heroes, the number 3 podcast on all 3 of them. And once again, we'll be back in 2 weeks, hopefully. We'll say 2 weeks, with The Big Boss. So until then, I'm Matthew.
I'm Marty.
I'm Carlos.
And we are the Heroes 3. Remember your training.
Heroes 3 is part of the Mercado Brothers Podcast Network.